Ted Bundy had been out of his cell.
A man named Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy.
I'll plead not guilty right now.
I'm Makenzie Lesley, and this is the terrifying truth of Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is one of the most infamous and notorious serial killers to this day. He's known for the brutal kidnappings, rapes, and murders of countless young women around the U.S. in the 1970s. On November 24, 1946, Louise Cowell gave birth to Theodore Robert Cowell, known to become the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy. He was born in a home for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont, and remained there for the first 2 years of his life. Throughout the early stages of his life, Bundy went through lots of uncertainty surrounding his legitimacy and family dynamics. He was convinced by his family that his mother was instead his sister, and was raised primarily by his grandparents as an adopted child, though he claims he already knew. His grandfather was an extremely violent and frightening man. These cycles of abuse are described to be generational. Bundy also had full access to pornographic magazines through his grandfather, which would later fuel his murderous fantasies. Signs of instability arose in his early childhood as he placed knives around his sleeping aunt who, when awoke, saw her 3-year-old nephew looking at her smiling. He actually grew up as a very shy and timid child, often getting teased for his speech impediment and his inability to keep up with his Boy Scout troop. In 1951, his mother married Johnny Bundy. Ted gained 3 half-siblings and took his stepfather's last name despite resenting him. Unfortunately, things did not get much better for the young Bundy. In the later years of his adolescence, he continued to be a loner in school and only went on one date. This time in his life was the beginning of his criminal tendencies, as he shoplifted ski equipment, attempted car theft, and even became a peeping Tom by spying on strangers. He enjoyed detective stories that often included gore-filled depictions of rape and murder, which could be an effect from his early exposure to pornography. Even though his childhood had been unpleasant, his adulthood was seemingly a sudden, complete opposite matter. He had graduated with a degree in psychology from the University of Washington. He then attended law school in Utah, but never graduated with a degree.
And yes, I intend to complete my legal education and become a lawyer and be a damn good lawyer.
Bundy had almost reinvented himself completely, seeming more socially confident and active in political matters, even getting a letter from the Republican governor of Washington after working on his campaign. He even fell in love with Diane Edwards in his junior year of college, spending most of his time trying to impress her. However, the relationship eventually burned out. This devastated him, and was the main contribution to the spiral that would soon turn murderous. As he began his murder spree, he preyed upon young women using several different tactics. He would stage an injury by wearing a cast or sling around his arm, posing as a police officer, or, on a more aggressive account, would sneak into his victims' homes while they were asleep. His killings often shared similarities with each other, as he would kidnap them, handcuff them into the passenger seat of his car, and knock them unconscious. If the victim regained consciousness while he was driving, he would convince her that she had been injured and he was transporting her to a hospital. Most of the bodies were never found, or were found buried in mountainous areas. Throughout the years of murder, the circumstances of each crime evolved. He started spreading the dump sites out geographically by driving hours away from the murder site to bury the bodies. But as the authorities got closer to figuring out who he was, he got more anxious and sporadic, preying on more middle school age girls instead of his other victims, who were college age. Ted Bundy murdered several women from 1974 to 1978. The names of these women, in order of death, are Linda Ann Healy, Donna Gail Manson, Susan Elaine Rancourt, Roberta Kathy Parks, Brenda Carole Ball, Georgianne Hawkins, Janice Ann Ott, Denise Naslund, Melissa Smith, Deborah Jean Kent, Karen Eileen Campbell, Julie Cunningham, Denise Lynn Oliverson, Lynette Dawn Culver, Suzanne Curtis, Margaret Bowman, Lisa Levy, and Kimberly Leach. His first reported murder was of a woman named Linda Ann Healy. She was a senior at the University of Washington, majoring in psychology. She worked part-time for Western Ski Promotions and broadcasted ski condition reports on the radio. Bundy abducted and strangled her on February 1st, 1974 in Seattle, Washington. His last reported murder, which would later lead to his death sentence, was of a 12-year-old girl, Kimberly Leach. She was a 7th grader at Lake City Junior High School and was abducted by Bundy in the middle of the school day on February 9th, 1978. She was then raped and murdered. Her body was found partly decomposed in a wooded area near the Suwannee River in Suwannee County. All these victims were found to have eerie similarities with each other. Each woman was a teenager or young adult in college, being anywhere from 12 to 26 years old. They were all attractive, white females with long, healthy, dark hair parted down the middle. Unlike the many unlucky women who died, there were some who survived his attempts of abduction and murder. These women are known to be Karen Chandler, Kathy Kleiner, Cheryl Thomas, Carole DeRanch, Rhonda Stapley, and Elizabeth Klepper. There were several agencies involved in the investigation of this serial killer, such as the Leon County Sheriff's Office, the Tallahassee Police Department, the Pensacola Police Department in Florida, and the FBI. A police officer had found suspicious evidence in his trunk, like a crowbar, ice pick, flashlights, gloves, a knit ski mask, handcuffs, and a strange mask made from pantyhose. He also bit several of his victims with immense strength, leaving bite impressions as evidence. However, this investigation was far from easy. Many of the victims' bodies were never recovered, making it hard to prove anything. When he was put in custody, he escaped out of a vent in the ceiling and continued to murder. He posed as a charming, good, and charismatic man as so to not warrant suspicion. Ted Bundy's trial began on January 7, 1980. Unlike prior trials, he did not act as his own legal counsel and was instead represented by attorneys Julius Africano and Lynn Thompson. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity. During the penalty phase, he called his girlfriend Carole Ann Boone and examined her as a character witness. He suddenly asked her to marry him, to which she responded yes.
Carole, do you want to marry me?
Yes.
And I want to marry you?
Yes.
And I do want to marry you.
After failing to humanize himself by pulling the proposal stunt, he was sentenced to death, 2 years exactly after Kimberly Leach's death. Ted Bundy died on January 24, 1989 due to the electric chair. Since his death, survivor Kathy Kleiner has published A Light in the Dark, Surviving More Than Ted Bundy. Another event is Ted Bundy, The Survivors, a docuseries starring the survivors Carole Ann Boone, Karen Sparks Epley, and Carole DeRanch. So, is Ted Bundy a psychopath or a sociopath? Evidence points to a mix of both, however, I believe he is a psychopath. He was highly educated, graduating from the University of Washington with a degree in psychology. He was also extremely charismatic and charming, and manipulated his victims by convincing them he was an authority figure. Ted Bundy's murders shook the U.S., making him one of the most infamous serial killers of our time. Several young women's lives were stolen abruptly, and the survivors will live with permanent injuries, along with traumatic memories of living through his attempts of murder. Thanks to the investigative agencies and forensic scientists, his reign of terrors were put to an end. This has been The Terrifying Truth of Ted Bundy. Thanks for watching.